Hi, I'm Annemarie with Speak Confident English, and welcome to this week's Confident English lesson, where we are focused on how to prepare for a presentation in English, and I'm going to share with you 7 simple strategies that will remove some of the stress, the fear, or the anxiety that you have about giving a presentation in English. Of course, a presentation is when you have to speak in front of a group of people to present your research, your expertise, or some important information. That might be in front of 100 people, 500 people, or 1,000 at a huge international conference. It might be in front of your colleagues at a business meeting. Those different kinds of presentations have 2 things in common. Number 1, the fears that we have are the same. Whether it's a small group or a huge audience, we might be afraid of what will other people think? Will they understand us? And how will they judge us in our second language? What happens if you make a mistake, or even worse, if you forget a word or the grammar that you want to use while you're speaking? And number 3, what if someone asks you a question and you're not really sure if you understand the question correctly? Those fears are the first thing that both small and large presentations have in common. The second thing they have in common are the strategies that help us overcome those challenges, overcome those worries, so we can focus on communicating clearly, being confident, and prepared when you give your presentation. So let's get started on those 7 strategies that you can use to be successfully prepared for a presentation in English. Step number 1, planning. Planning is essential, but I want to give you a different way to think about this. I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, where is your audience right now? And I don't mean the location or the place, but I mean, what do they understand about the topic that you need to focus on? If you're talking about marketing strategy and a proposal to a client, what do they understand now? Or if you're presenting scientific research, what level of understanding does your audience have on that topic? Or if you're trying to convince an audience of something, you want to change their mind or you want them to act on something, what is their current position? Now, the second question is, after you speak, where do you want your audience to be? What do you want them to understand or know? What action do you want them to take? When you know those 2 questions, it's like figuring out a map. You have your starting point for your audience and the end point. And your job in the presentation is to get them from point A to point B. And when you think about those 2 questions, it helps you to consider, what are the important things you need to discuss in your presentation? What do you need to highlight? How can you help your audience go from here, point A, to point B, where you want them? That is your first step in the planning process. Strategy number 2 is to know who and what. What I mean by that is, after you've figured out your map, you know where your audience is starting and where you want them to be after your presentation, it's really important to know who you're speaking to and what should you say to them. If you are a software developer and you are going to speak at a conference with other software developers, they speak the same language as you. They use the same jargon, the same vocabulary. They understand the same concepts. But what if you're a software developer and you've created a new application and you're going to present this application to a group of new moms? suddenly what you say is probably going to change. You're going to need different language, different vocabulary, because that new group of moms probably doesn't know all the jargon and technical language that you use in your everyday job. This is such an important step in communicating clearly. When you understand what you should say and how you should say it to your audience, they can follow you more easily and feel connected to what you're saying. Strategy 3 is to get organized. This is where you take all that information you want to share, the key points, the details that you need to include. Maybe there are some data, statistics, information that is essential, and you need to start to organize it. Typically in English, we have 3 sections in a presentation. We have the introduction or the opening, and this is where you present your idea. You give a quick overview of the primary focus. The second section is what we call the body. And in this body, you have your key points and your supporting details. And then finally, section 3 is the closing. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that because I actually have other lessons specifically for each of those different sections, what you should include, how to be better prepared for each part of your presentation. Strategy number 4 is show, don't tell. What I mean by that is people love stories. They remember stories and they remember things that are visual. If you're giving a presentation that has a lot of data, statistics, numbers, dates, times, and important little pieces of information, consider some other ways that you can help your audience understand those important details. Perhaps there is a story or a graph, a chart, some visual cue, a picture that you can share that will help your audience visualize and more easily remember the things that you really want to share with them. Now, if you want more information about what I mean when I say show, don't tell, I do have an example of this in the online lesson. So after you watch this video, make sure to check that out to get my example of showing and not telling. Strategy number 5, talk, don't read. Talk to your audience, look at them, communicate with them. I'm sure that you've been in a business meeting or at a presentation where someone just read the information to you, and it might have sounded like this. Strategy number 5, talk, don't read. It's important to connect to your audience and to look at them regularly so they feel engaged in your topic. Now, did that look and sound like I was connecting to you, like I was talking to you? Probably not. Number 1, my eyes were focused on what I was reading, not on you or not on the audience. And my voice changed, my intonation, the way I expressed myself changed. So as much as possible, when you prepare for your presentation, you want to be sure that you're ready to talk and communicate with your audience, that you know your presentation and you can talk about it without reading everything. Of course, having notes is a great strategy. I always recommend having a few key points written down, maybe a mind map or something that helps you stay focused and organized and makes sure that you don't forget anything. But you want to know your material, and that will help your audience be focused on you, listening to what you're saying, and help you to be a much more effective speaker in English. Strategy number 6 is to think ahead. One of those fears that we talked about is the fear of someone asking a question and you don't understand it, which is a terrible feeling. After you've started to plan your presentation and you know where your audience is starting, where you want them to be, and the best way for you to communicate with them, if you think about what words and language to use, and you've started to organize your key points, all of the details you need to include, you can begin to anticipate. Think ahead about what are some of the missing pieces. What are some potential questions that someone in the audience might ask you? When you are able to anticipate those questions, you can also be prepared to answer them. Another great way to be prepared for this is to practice your presentation in front of your colleagues, your friends, or family, and then see what questions they have at the end of your presentation. Again, that will help you either put the missing pieces into your presentation. Maybe there's something you forgot about or didn't think about. Or it can help you be prepared for those potential questions at the end. And finally, strategy number 7 is practice. Practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the more you will really know your presentation. You will know the language you want to use. You'll be able to remember the vocabulary and the grammar that you need. You'll be able to talk and connect to your audience instead of reading. And most importantly, it will help your confidence. Now, many people encourage you to practice, for example, in front of a mirror. And that's a great strategy, absolutely. But I want to ask you to do one more thing. I want you to practice your presentation while you record yourself. And here's why. When you practice in front of a mirror, it's very difficult to notice any mistakes or challenges that you have in your speaking. You're too busy in the moment practicing. But when you record yourself, when you're finished, you can go back and listen to it. And at this moment, you have time to analyze what you've said. Is that how you wanted to communicate? Are you happy with what you said? Or do you want to change something? It's essential to have this time to think about what you've said, and it gives you the opportunity to make those changes. The best news is no one else needs to hear your recording. When you're finished with it, you can delete it, and no one else needs to know. But it will give you the opportunity to perfect what you say, make different grammar choices, different vocabulary choices, and feel much more confident in how you plan to communicate in your presentation. As always, I do have a challenge question for you. I want you to visit the online lesson, and in the comment section, I want you to tell me, have you ever given a presentation in English? And if you have, what is one piece of advice that you would share with someone else? In this video today, I shared my advice with these 7 strategies, but I'm sure that you also have some fantastic advice from your experience. I'd love for you to share that with me and with others in the Confident English community, and you can do that by sharing in the comment section at the bottom of the lesson. With that, thank you so much for joining me. If you found this lesson useful to you, be sure to share it on Facebook and give it a thumbs up on YouTube. And I look forward to seeing you next week for your Confident English lesson.